Alright, so we broke down Walt's intelligence, and now we're doing the same thing for Mike Ehrmantraut. And Mike is interesting because he's presented as the ultimate professional, the guy who's good at everything. But when you actually analyze his intelligence across different categories, you see he's got his own blind spots and weaknesses just like everyone else. Mike operates completely differently than Walt. Where Walt is this ego-driven academic genius, Mike is this experienced street-level operator who's learned through decades of hard lessons. Different skill set, different approach, different results. Strategic intelligence, 8 out of 10. Mike's strategic thinking is strong, but it's got limitations that people don't always notice. Mike is good at planning operations. When he's setting up a job, he thinks through the details. What could go wrong? What's the backup plan? How do we minimize risk? That's solid strategic thinking. Like when he's helping with the train heist, Mike's the one making sure everyone knows their role, everyone has an exit strategy, everyone understands the timing. Or when he's doing surveillance, Mike knows how to position himself, how to stay invisible, how to gather information without being detected. But here's where Mike's strategic thinking hits its limits. Mike is excellent at tactics, but sometimes struggles with long-term strategy. He's so focused on the job in front of him that he doesn't always see the bigger picture coming. Like, Mike works for Gus for years without really planning for what happens if Gus dies. When Gus gets blown up, Mike's whole world falls apart because he didn't have a contingency for that scenario. A truly elite strategic thinker would have had an exit plan that didn't depend on one person staying alive. Or look at how Mike handles Walt. Mike knows Walt is dangerous and unpredictable. Mike literally tells Walt that everything was working fine until Walt came along, but Mike doesn't do anything about it until it's too late. He keeps working with Walt, keeps trying to manage Walt, when strategically, he should have just eliminated that problem or walked away much earlier. Mike's also not great at political strategy within organizations. He's loyal to Gus and does what he's told, but he doesn't maneuver for position or build his own power base. When Gus dies, Mike has no leverage and no protection because he was just a loyal soldier. So Mike gets an 8 because his tactical planning is excellent, but his long-term strategic vision has gaps. He's the guy you want planning a specific operation, but maybe not the guy designing the 5-year business plan. Score, 8 out of 10. Strong tactical mind but limited long-term strategic vision. Creative intelligence, 6. Creative intelligence is about innovation and finding novel solutions, and this is not Mike's strongest area. Mike is competent and experienced, but he's not particularly inventive. He solves problems using tried and true methods that he's learned over his career as a cop and then as a criminal, which works fine most of the time, but it means Mike's not coming up with breakthrough ideas. When Mike needs to do surveillance, he does standard surveillance. When he needs to intimidate someone, he uses standard intimidation techniques. When he needs to clean up a crime scene, he follows established procedures. It's all professional and effective, but it's not creative. Compare Mike to Walt, who's constantly coming up with these weird, innovative solutions like using magnets to destroy evidence or fulminated mercury as a weapon. Mike would never think of stuff like that because Mike sticks to what he knows works. There are moments where Mike shows some creativity, like when he's tracking that guy in the Madrigal warehouse and he manipulates the situation to get information. Or when he's dealing with Lydia and comes up with different approaches to handling her paranoia. But these are variations on standard techniques, not truly novel thinking. The thing is, Mike doesn't really need high creative intelligence for his role. He's the fixer, the cleaner, the guy who executes plans reliably. That job requires competence and experience more than innovation. But it does mean Mike sometimes struggles when faced with truly unusual problems that don't fit his established playbook. Score, 6 of 10. Competent professional but not an innovator. Social intelligence, 9. This is where Mike really shines. His social intelligence is way higher than Walt's, and it's a huge part of what makes Mike effective. Social intelligence is about reading people, understanding social dynamics, knowing how to interact with different types of people, and Mike is excellent at all of this. Mike can read a room instantly. He knows who's dangerous, who's scared, who's lying, who's reliable. When he walks into a situation, he's assessing everyone's body language and tone and figuring out the real dynamics underneath what people are saying. And Mike adjusts his behavior to fit the situation. With Gus, Mike is professional and deferential. With Jesse, Mike is almost paternal and protective. With Walt, Mike is direct and confrontational. With his granddaughter, Mike is gentle and warm. He's got different modes and he switches between them naturally. Mike also understands loyalty and how to build it. He takes care of his guys, makes sure their families are provided for, treats them with respect. That's why his crew stays loyal even when they're in prison facing serious time. Mike built real relationships based on mutual respect. Where Mike's social intelligence really shows is in conflict de-escalation. Mike can walk into a tense situation and calm it down just by how he carries himself and what he says. He's not aggressive unless he needs to be. He projects competence and control in a way that makes people trust his judgment. The only reason Mike doesn't get a perfect 10 is that his social intelligence is somewhat limited to professional context. We don't see Mike in a lot of normal social situations. His relationships outside of work are pretty limited. He's got his granddaughter and that's about it. So while his professional social skills are top tier, his personal social life is pretty barren. Score 9. Manipulative intelligence 7. Mike can manipulate people when he needs to, but it's not his preferred approach and he's not as good at it as someone like Walt. Mike's manipulation is usually pretty straightforward. He uses his authority and competence to guide situations. He tells people what to do in a way that makes them want to follow his lead. That's a form of manipulation, but it's pretty honest as manipulation goes. Like with Jesse, Mike doesn't run elaborate psychological games the way Walt does. Mike just treats Jesse with respect, shows him how to do things right, and Jesse naturally wants to live up to Mike's expectations. That's manipulation through mentorship rather than through deception. When Mike does manipulate more directly, he's decent at it, but not exceptional. He can lie convincingly when needed, he can play roles to extract information, but he doesn't have that natural gift for getting inside people's heads and twisting them around that Walt has. Part of this is that Mike's moral code limits his willingness to manipulate certain ways. Mike won't manipulate through emotional abuse or by exploiting people's deepest insecurities. He's got lines he won't cross, which is admirable ethically. It does limit his manipulative range. Mike's also not great at long-term manipulation. He can run a con for a specific job, but he's not playing these months-long psychological games. When he's dealing with someone like Lydia, who requires constant management and manipulation, Mike finds it exhausting and annoying. Score 7. Capable when needed, but not a natural manipulator. Practical/survival intelligence, 10 out of 10. This is Mike's highest category and it's what his entire skill set is built around. Practical intelligence is about surviving in the real world, adapting to circumstances, making smart decisions under pressure, and Mike is absolutely elite at this. Mike has survived decades in dangerous professions, first as a cop in Philadelphia dealing with corrupt colleagues and violent criminals, then as a private investigator and fixer in the drug trade. The fact that he's made it to his 60s in these careers shows incredible survival intelligence. Mike knows how to assess risk accurately. He can look at a situation and immediately understand what's dangerous and what's manageable. He doesn't take unnecessary risks, but he also doesn't let fear paralyze him. That balance is what keeps him alive. When things go wrong, Mike adapts instantly. He doesn't freeze or panic. He evaluates the new situation and adjusts his approach. Like when the truck heist goes sideways or when he's being investigated by the police, Mike just pivots and handles it. Mike's also incredibly resourceful with whatever he has available. He's not dependent on perfect conditions or ideal equipment. He can work with what's on hand and still get the job done. That's practical intelligence in its purest form. The only thing that undermines Mike's survival intelligence is his loyalty, which we'll talk about more later. But in terms of pure practical survival skills and judgment, Mike is operating at the absolute highest level. Score 10. Mike's practical intelligence is flawless. Analytical intelligence. 7. Analytical intelligence is about breaking down complex problems logically, and Mike is decent at this, but it's not his strongest suit. Mike is good at tactical analysis. He can look at a building and figure out security vulnerabilities. He can analyze a crime scene and understand what happened. He can review surveillance footage and pick out important details. That's all solid analytical work. But Mike's not operating at the level of someone like Walt or Gus when it comes to abstract analytical thinking. Mike is more concrete and practical in his analysis. He thinks about what he can see and touch and measure, not about theoretical possibilities. Like, Mike wouldn't come up with the elaborate chemical solutions Walt creates because Mike's brain doesn't work that way. Mike's analysis is more about observation and experience than about pure logic and reasoning. Mike also sometimes lets his assumptions limit his analysis. Because he's experienced, he thinks he's seen everything before, so when he encounters something genuinely new, he might try to fit it into a familiar pattern instead of analyzing it fresh. That's the downside of experience-based thinking. Where Mike's analytical skills really show is in understanding human behavior patterns. He can analyze someone's habits and routines and predict what they'll do. That's a specific type of analysis that Mike excels at because he spent years watching people. Emotional intelligence. 8. Mike's emotional intelligence is pretty high, especially compared to someone like Walt, but it's got some specific limitations. Mike understands emotions in other people pretty well. He can tell when someone's scared or lying or about to break. He reads emotional states accurately and responds appropriately. With Jesse, Mike recognizes that Jesse's guilt and trauma are eating him alive, and Mike tries to help Jesse process that in healthier ways. Mike also manages his own emotions pretty effectively. He doesn't let anger or fear control his decisions. When Walt is being infuriating, Mike gets frustrated, but he doesn't let that frustration make him stupid. He stays controlled. But this is where Mike's emotional intelligence gets complicated. Mike has this huge wall around his deeper feelings. He's buried his emotions about his son's death, about his guilt over what happened in Philadelphia, about all the violence he's participated in. He functions by not processing those feelings. That's not healthy emotional intelligence. That's emotional suppression disguised as control. Real emotional intelligence includes being able to feel your feelings and work through them, not just lock them away. Mike also struggles with emotional vulnerability. He can't really open up to people or form deep emotional connections outside of his granddaughter. His relationship with Gus is professional. His friendships with other criminals are surface level. He's emotionally isolated despite being surrounded by people. And Mike's loyalty, while admirable in some ways, is an emotional attachment that blinds him to reality. His devotion to Gus and to his guys in prison is emotionally driven, not rationally justified. That emotional loyalty is what keeps him in dangerous situations when he should leave. Street/criminal intelligence, 10 out of 10. This is the other category where Mike gets a perfect score because street intelligence is literally his entire skill set. Mike knows how the criminal world works better than almost anyone in the show. He understands the unwritten rules, the hierarchies, the codes of conduct. He knows when to show respect, when to show strength, when to stay quiet. Mike can navigate different criminal cultures seamlessly. He works with Mexican cartel members, with street-level dealers, with white-collar criminals like Lydia, with neo-Nazis like Jack's crew. And in each context, Mike knows how to carry himself and what language to use. He understands criminal economics and logistics. How do you move product? How do you launder money? How do you avoid law enforcement while running ongoing operations? Mike has decades of experience with all of this. Mike also knows how to use violence appropriately in the criminal context. He's not trigger happy, but he's not hesitant either. He understands that in that world, sometimes you have to hurt people to maintain order or protect yourself. But he also knows that unnecessary violence creates problems. That's sophisticated criminal judgment, and Mike's reputation in the criminal world is impeccable. People know he's professional, competent, discreet, and honorable by criminal standards. That reputation is worth more than money in that world. It's what keeps him employed and relatively safe. The only people who question Mike's street intelligence are academic types like Walt, who don't understand that intelligence looks different in different contexts. Mike might not be able to teach chemistry, but in the criminal world, he's operating at an expert level. So if we average Mike's scores, he comes out to about an 8.1 out of 10, which is almost identical to Walt's overall score. But the distribution is completely different. Mike's got perfect 10s in practical survival intelligence and street intelligence. Those are his core competencies, and he's genuinely world-class at them. He's also got strong scores in social intelligence and emotional intelligence, which are areas where Walt struggles, but Mike scores lower in creative intelligence and analytical intelligence compared to Walt. Mike's not an innovator or an abstract thinker. He's an experienced professional who executes established methods really well. What this tells us is that Mike and Walt are intelligent in almost opposite ways. Walt's got the academic genius and innovative thinking, but lacks practical skills and emotional awareness. Mike's got the practical expertise and social skills, but lacks the creative brilliance and strategic vision. And this explains why they clash so much. Walt thinks he's smarter than Mike because Walt's analytical and creative intelligence are higher. Mike thinks he's smarter than Walt because Mike's practical and social intelligence are higher. They're both right from their own perspective and both wrong about the other. Mike's whole identity is built on being the professional who handles things, but that identity blinds him to the fact that some situations can't be handled. They can only be escaped from. And by the time Mike realizes Walt is one of those situations, it's too late to get away. If Mike had Walt's strategic intelligence or Walt had Mike's practical intelligence, either one of them would have been unstoppable. But they each have the exact weaknesses that their environment was designed to exploit. That's what makes both of them fascinating to analyze. The other interesting thing about Mike is that his intelligence made him good at being a criminal, but it didn't make him happy. Mike's smart enough to be really effective at what he does, but not quite smart enough to figure out how to escape from it. He's trapped by his own competence. Alright, let me know what you think in the comments. Did I score Mike too high or too low in any category? I know some people might argue Mike deserves higher in strategic intelligence or lower in emotional intelligence. Mike's a complex character, and there's definitely room for different interpretations of his abilities and limitations.